Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are around the world. Welcome to this month's Visual Builder Office Hours, and this month we're going to cover the new features that are coming out in our May 2022 or 2207 release. My name is Shai Schmelzer, and also on the line is Laura and Brian. We are all from the PM team, and we'll be happy to answer your questions during the session. If at any point of time you have any question, there's a Q&A panel for this Zoom. Just post your questions over there, and we'll handle them either during the presentation or towards the end. We're doing this seminar every month. We have a new one, and you're welcome to join. We usually talk technical things, and today we're going to talk about what's new in the release that we're rolling out this month. But before we start that, I wanted to update you on some other new technical resources that we've been releasing over the past month. One of them is the Visual Builder Cookbook. So hopefully by this point of time, you are all familiar with the VB Cookbook. It's basically a set of code samples that you can use to learn how to do things in Visual Builder. It's available in a website. So if you go to vbcookbook.oracle.com, you can see the running application with all the samples and see the runtime behavior. Each sample has a recipe on the side that explains how to do or how to build this. But beyond that, that cookbook is also available for you to get the code directly. To do that, you basically go over to your Visual Builder instance, you create a new application, and from the template, you choose the VB Cookbook template. This basically creates an application with all the samples in your instance, and then you have direct access to the full code, and you can basically learn directly from the code. So we've been, like, the cookbook has been out there for over a year now, and all the time we're adding more and more recipes to it. Some of the recipes that we added lately to it include a new demo and basically also a new template for a responsive web mobile application. So this basically is available also as part of the cookbook, but also if you now create a new Visual Builder application, when you pick up the template, one of the template there is called Responsive Dashboard, and that one basically shows you a UI that can behave nicely on different sizes of devices. It also shows you a nice navigation menu on the left side. So it's an option for you if you want to pick up that as a sample or as a base for applications that you create. Okay. We also did a bunch of demos around the data grid. The data grid shows you all sorts of capabilities of showing data in grids, allowing you also to do things like merge cells, freezing cells, and styling specific columns. There's a new demo for editable table. So probably a lot of you have already created editable table. There's a new data type called buffering data provider that allows you to create tables also on top of SDP, service data providers. There's a bunch of samples with the dynamic UI components, and you can go over and see how to use those as well, and a bunch of others. We also have a blog entry that gives you a list of all the new stuff. But if you haven't looked at the cookbook in general, go over and look at which demos are in there. It's likely that some of the patterns that you're trying to implement in your own implementations are also available there, and you can learn directly from the code. So as I mentioned, there's an entry about this new version of the cookbook in our blog. In general, our blog is at blogs.oracle.com/vbcs. And we are constantly putting out new blog entries. Those are some of the blog entries that we put out over the last couple of months, I think. One of the newer one is about automatic testing for VB apps. That's basically how to do automated tests of your user interface, how to define and run tests in case you want to make sure your application is working and automate some aspects of it. This is based on, again, experience that we have internally on how we are testing our applications when we're developing them. We have some blogs about integration with new technologies. One of them is GraphQL. GraphQL is a way for you to access data on the backend. Some systems, instead of using REST, are using GraphQL to expose data. And it's very easy, actually, to integrate with GraphQL and use the VB REST access to also get data from GraphQL. You have a video and a blog that shows you how to do that. We have a blog about how to integrate with blockchain wallets into your application. Again, if you're in this market, even though the market right now is crashing, if you still want to build blockchain-based applications, there's a sample over there. One of the nice things that this sample shows you is also how to integrate third-party JavaScript libraries into your application. So it's a nice example of implementing something like that. We have a couple of blog entries about new capabilities in the business object area. One of them is how to define all sorts of fields and object validators with all sorts of groovy samples of how those validators can be defined. And another one shows you a capability that we added to business object to have an alternative primary key field instead of the ID field that we generate by default. So if you need another field from your data to be the primary key, we show you how to do that. We have a blog that shows you how to do a prompt asking people to install your progressive web apps. This is something that we had in the mobile application, but when you take a web application and you switch it to be a progressive web application, and you want people to know, hey, you can actually install this application on your device, it's nice to show them this little pop-up. This will show you how to set up such a pop-up and customize it to do whatever you want. We have a blog that shows how to do editable arrays in a bind for each. This is another approach to do kind of an array where you need to edit multiple rows, have all the rows be updatable at the same time, unlike an editable table. And we also have a sample of something like that in the cookbook, and there's also a blog that shows you the basics of how to do that. And we have a blog that shows you how we now automate action chain testing. So it also shows you a little bit about how to create action chain tests for your applications. Again, automating this process of testing your business logic while you're developing and as you modify your action chain, kind of promoting test-driven development. For the DevOps area, one of the key new features that we added is Docker-based CI/CD capabilities. So that's basically the ability to have your build executor based on Docker. It can improve performance. It can also allow you to add a bunch of other types of software to your build server. So this is another thing that we have there that you might be interested in looking at. So again, if you're not already following blogs.oracle.com/VBCS, you can actually hook to our RSS feed and get notification every time the new blog is out there. Now, one of the great things we're seeing lately is that not only us blocking from the PM team, we're also seeing a bunch of you guys and your peers doing blogging on their own. So a bunch of other VB developers out there sharing the knowledge of tips and tricks and techniques of things they did. And you have some samples over here. Satish, for example, published a blog about how to parse CSV files in Visual Builder and get them into a JSON format. We have a blog about how to do PDF and document signing published by Sharif. This is actually an entry on LinkedIn, which is another way to blog how-tos. And he has a full code sample over there. Anuj have a video that shows how to do a customized lock screen for Visual Builder. Guy has a post on our community forum which shows you how to integrate Google Maps into your Visual Builder. Our own A-team and Angela from there created a blog entry that shows you how to do identity propagation from a SaaS application through VB through an ORDS backend. So basically use the VB user and do identity propagation and validation against ORDS backend. And as I mentioned before, Ben, which is one of our sales consultants, wrote a blog about how to do crypto wallet integration into Visual Builder. And again, all of those guys are people who are working on a regular basis with Visual Builder, did something, and then they just share it with the community. And this is something that we would like all of you to encourage all of you to do. You all have experience now using Visual Builder. you're doing stuff. Maybe you have some tricks that you developed, some techniques, some tips that you want to share. And there's a lot of now what we call micro-blogging platforms. So if you don't have time to manage your own blog and do regular publishing, there are platforms like Hashnode and Dev.to that basically give you a way to very easily post single blogs without having to do any web maintenance or stuff like that. Other people, again, are using LinkedIn as a place where they post articles and how-tos, and having those type of things is always useful for your own resume. When you're looking for your next position, people are looking to see, okay, can we see that you're knowledgeable, that you have experience in things, and showing them, hey, I have a blog with that many hits on it. It's a great way to get exposure and promote your own brand. By the way, if you are creating blogs, publishing stuff, please let us know about it. We have a LinkedIn Visual Builder group, and feel free to join this group and post about your blogs over there. This is also the place where we notify everyone about blog posts that we do. So if you're not part of our LinkedIn group already, just go to LinkedIn, search for Visual Builder, and join our group. All right, let's talk about new stuff. So one of the things we've been doing over the last month is we completed the release of Visual Builder as an OCI native service. Okay, so up until now, Visual Builder was on the left side under the OCI Classic services. From now on, we have new instances of Visual Builder that you can create as OCI native Gen 2 services in the Oracle Cloud. You would find this under the menu option of developer services. You'll find the Visual Builder entry over there. In terms of the development and the runtime experience, it's pretty much the same thing as what you already have. It's just running on our new infrastructure, so it's better infrastructure. It does give some advantages for the admins of the instance. Okay, with the new Gen 2, we have enhanced security in terms of accessing the instance because it's part of a compartment and you can have control at the level of the compartment and who has access to that. In terms of scalability, it allows you directly to control how many nodes are spun up for your Visual Builder instance. So if you need more nodes, you can directly access the instance setting and increase the node number. So that's basically the number of OCPUs that are running your applications and handling all the requests. And another thing that it helps you with is the issue of customized endpoints. Okay, this is now self-service. You don't need to open a service request in order to create a customized endpoint, which is something you need if you want to do vanity URL. So instead of having the URL for your application be something Oracle something, you can have it basically point to your own domain, and now it's completely self-service with our Gen 2 instances. So all of this is in our documentation, and you will find we have a new admin guide for the Gen 2 VB instances. So make sure to read that if you're spinning up a new instance in Gen 2. In terms of transitioning your application from one to the other, it's a simple matter of export, import of the application and then of the data from one instance to the other. Or if you're using Visual Builder Studio, you can basically just deploy from your Git directly to your new instance. Just point to the new instance in the environment. Okay, so this is something that is now available in all our commercial data center anywhere around the world. You can spin up a new Visual Builder instance over there. So now let's go over and talk about what we are releasing in the May release. So the May release, also codenamed 2207, is rolling out starting this week. It's going to roll out for the OIC, the Oracle Integration instances, in 2 windows. The first window is rolling out starting this week, and then in 2 weeks, you'll see the other window. In terms of the interface in Visual Builder Studio, we expect to release that towards the end of this week or the beginning of next week. So you would see a new version of Visual Builder Studio with the new capabilities out there. And if you have a standalone Visual Builder instance, we're going to start rolling out at the end of the month. You probably already got a notification about the upgrade time for your instance. Remember that you can decide on the specific time and specific window that each of your instances is going to get. You can have separation between the development instance and the production instance to have them updated to different windows, which would allow you to test your application in the development and QA instances before you go to a production instance. So you have control over that at the instance level setting. So with this new release, again, we're updating our client libraries. You're getting a new Jet version. We're moving from Jet 11 to Jet 12. And you're also getting a new VB runtime set of libraries, version 2207. Just remember, when we are releasing a new version, we encourage you to upgrade your application. So if you go to your application setting, there's an upgrade button, and you can upgrade your application, which we highly recommend to do, because you're getting all the benefits of new features, of performance enhancements, security fixes, and stuff like that. We still support the current version, so 2207 and 2 versions back. So we will support you up until 2201. You'll be able to work with those versions in your Visual Designer. Okay. If you have an application that is based on an older version of Visual Builder, you're going to see this little screen that you're seeing here on the bottom right that tells you, hey, you need to upgrade your application. You still have access to all your source code from the left side, but we want you to go over, click the upgrade button, and upgrade your application to the newest version. One more thing that we always need to remind people, if you're using an Alta-based theme, which is not based on the Redwood stable, you would also need to update your theme. Okay, so you would need to regenerate the theme to be on the Jet 12 version and do that, and then your upgrade would be complete. Okay. Beyond that, we encourage you again to start thinking about moving from Alta-based UIs to Redwood-based UIs, and if you need to customize, to use the stable theme that we provide as a way to have an upgrade-proof theme for your application. Right, so you're getting Jet 12. Jet 12 has a bunch of new features in it. Some of the new component that you're going to see, there's a new component called the message banner, which is what you're seeing on the bottom right over here. It's basically a way for you to show messages in a different way compared to the pop-up messages that we have right now. It's called the banner message. And again, you can customize the type of message, the level, colors, stuff like that. In the tab bar, we now support things like badges, icons, and metadata. You can see that on the top over there. The table has a new capability for the table called Add Row option, basically allowing you to click a button or do some operation, and then a row is opened at the top of the table to allow people to enter new data into the table. List and tables have a new behavior for deselect. So you can, once you select something, you can deselect it easily. And there's various other enhancements for Oracle Jet. So in general, what we recommend to do is go to the Jet website and read the release notes for each release. So again, this is release 12.0 that we're uptaking over here. Go over and read the new features for release 12 to get to know what things you can now implement in your application and what benefits you get from this new version. Now let's talk about some of the new features in the area of app development in the tool itself. So one of the things we did some work on is the flow diagram. So we had the flow diagram before, which was kind of a set of boxes. Now we have an actual flow diagram implemented over here, which shows you the flow between pages. So for applications that grow big, that have a lot of pages, this is very useful. It allows you to see all the relationships between pages, which page goes where, which page invokes another page. When you click on a page, we highlight a specific routes that are going from and to this page. Okay. Now, this diagram is not just for showing stuff, it's actually an interactive diagram that allows you to also develop things. So you can actually define pages and actions directly from the diagram. So on the left side, you would have a panel with items that you can drag and drop, and you can add pages to your application, directly connect them to do navigation, add if statements, stuff like that, switches to decide about the navigation. All of this can be done directly in the diagram. In addition, in the property inspector in the diagram, you can also set properties for the pages and the navigation actions that you're doing in your application. So this is a new capability. I'm going to show you a demo of it in a few minutes. It's very cool capability. One other new capability that we added is called custom actions. So, you know, when you're developing Visual Builder application, you work with action chains. There's a bunch of actions on the left, like call REST service or call a JavaScript function or invoke a component or start a process, and you can drag and drop them and position them on the action chain, right? But sometimes it would be useful for you to have your own actions. So this is what we allow you to do now. You can define your own actions that are going to be in the action chain. This is very useful if you have reusable code in your application. For example, let's say you have an export to PDF functionality. Okay, so you can define an action like that, drag and drop it into your page, into your action chain, and use it in an action and pass to it parameters, for example, what to export into PDF. Maybe you have a function that does some logging and you want to use it in your application, you can bring it in. And the nice thing is once you define it in an application, it's available, of course, across all the pages, all the flows, all the action chains in your application, and all the developers can use it. So again, you can have basically kind of your infrastructure team creating those type of actions, and all the developers would be able to use them. An action is comprised of two things. It has a JavaScript, which is basically the implementation. So that's the code it would actually execute. And it has a JSON-based description, which controls, for example, which parameters it's going to get, what values it's going to return, and all those descriptions that would show up on the right side when you drag it into an action chain. Okay, so it's all metadata definition. You define your parameters, the results from the action chain, and you define the logic using JavaScript. And this allows you, again, to increase reusability of code and make it easier for people not to have to code again and again pieces of reusable code in the application. Fragments are the other very big reusability features in Visual Builder. That's the ability to basically develop areas of your user interface complete with business logic that are going to be reused across your application. We had fragments for a couple of releases now. One thing that we added for fragments in this release is that they now have metadata. So on a fragment, you can define a title and description and also control where this fragment can be used. Okay, and all of this leads us to be able to show the fragments in our component palette. So in the component palette, all the fragments of your application would now show up just like any other component, and you can then drag and drop them into your pages to use them, and you also have the metadata to explain what they do. If we're talking about our component palette, we also did some work on the component palette. We now have different ways to see your component palette based on your preference. You can see a category view. So this is where the components are divided into different categories. You can see them alphabetically sorted. You can see them in a list view. You can see them in a grid view. And you basically control all of this from the little menu at the top. Well, the thing that always is very useful for me is just the search at the top. Again, instead of scrolling through all the components to find the one that you need, just start typing and we'll filter everything and we'll give you the component that you're after very easily over there. And again, fragments are also going to show up as an area on that component palette. All right, so let's see some of those features live in action. Open my Visual Builder application over here. I have a little application. It's a two-page application right now. It's basically, it allows you to see movies and then click to edit the details of the movie over in that page. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to show you is our flow diagram. So if I click on a flow over here, up until now you were seeing it in this view, which we call the box view, and you can see it over here. Now you can also see the flow view, and you can see actually the flow from one page to the other. Okay, so if I were to go back to my page, for example, and pick up the table and add, for example, with a quick start, a detail page, okay, like that, we'll pick up some fields that we want to show here, like that, and we can give a name for it, movie details, and click finish. This would basically add the page over, so I can now do a click on a row and go to that page. But the more interesting part for me is, of course, the fact that in our flow diagram, over here, now I have the flow that show that I can also go to movie details. Okay, so this is one aspect here. Again, as you click on pages, we highlight the pages that are related to that. So again, if your application becomes a very complex one with a lot of pages in it, clicking on stuff would make the picture a little clearer. Now, the other thing that this diagram can do is it can be used to actually develop stuff. So for example, if I want to build a new page that allows me to buy tickets to one of those movies, I can take a custom page and drop it, for example, directly on the first page. So this would create a new page and would also add navigation from the page I dropped it on. So if we call this book ticket page, okay, you now have this navigation from the start page to the book ticket. I can also, by the way, add pages that are not navigating anywhere else. So maybe I have a movie review page like that, and then I can add navigation and stuff like that to the diagram and connect those. Let's focus on the book ticket. So one of the things I can define for this page is I can define that this page requires an input parameter. And so we need a movie ID. And again, I can do this directly from here in the diagram while I'm working on the logic. Okay. Then I have the navigate to. I can see that now I have a movie ID that needs to be passed, and I can actually do the assignment directly from here as well. So we're picking up from the movie page. Okay, so from the start page, we're going to pick up the ID of the selected movie and pass it over here. So all of those things that relates to navigation can be done here. I also have a navigation action that has been created in my start page. So if I go to my start page now and I look under actions, there's a navigate action that was created for me directly from this diagram. Okay, and I can, for example, change the name of it or things like that if I want. And I can also go to my page and I can just, let's say, add a button here. Okay, call this one get ticket. Okay. And add an event, do a custom event on the action, and then pick this navigate action. So now when I click this button, I would navigate to my, to my ticket page. So this is the new page that I created and the navigation. So again, it's all done directly from over here in the diagram, very visually. And it can impact and create stuff in your pages directly. All right, let's talk about fragments for a second. So if you are not familiar, you can go over here to fragments and you can create a new fragment. Let's create a ticket booking fragment over here. Again, I can define where it can be used in the page content, in the page, stuff like that. And when I define the fragment, I now have over here metadata. So this can be book a ticket, and we can say pass a movie ID and buy tickets to it. Okay, so this is the description of the fragment. Okay, and you're going to see those two things being used in a couple of minutes. Now let's actually design the fragments. We can simply pick up our movie, bring it over here. And we want to show kind of a detail form. Okay, and again, we're gonna say add a few things over here, reorganize them. Okay, maybe we want to show some of the ratings. So maybe profitability. Right. And we then do next, and we need a movie thing over here. Oh, we need a parameter, just a second. Before I do that, let's first define the variable. Right, so we need a movie ID. Okay, that would be the number. Then we go to the fragments, bring this over, create a detail form, pick up the movie, the genre, some scores that it got, and let's also know which year it was created in, and then we take the movie ID and map it over here. right? Then it would be nice if we actually have in the movie ID some default value. Put 2, for example, over here. And if we go over here, we can see the detail over here. And then we need, this is the booking system. So we need a book, not book a ticket, sorry. We need a button, okay, over here. Okay, so this, call it even print ticket, something like that. Okay, so this is our functionality. And now we can go back to the page we designed, which is empty, and we can bring in fragments over here. So previously you needed to take a fragment container, bring it in, and then set things. But now if you actually scroll, okay, we have the fragments area. And we have the fragment we just created over here with the name we provided, with the little help over here that explains what this is all about. So those are the metadata things that you put in here. And now developers don't need to know, hey, I have a fragment. If they need a component for booking a ticket, they just drag and drop it over here and put it on the page. Okay, they would probably want to hook this up. So if we actually look at the fragment, it has an input parameter. Probably need to do a refresh here for a second. So if we look at our fragment over here, it has an input parameter, that we need to set. Anyway, so that's this functionality. And then the last functionality I wanted to show you here is also under resources now, we have this new area called actions, okay? And in fact, I already have one action, which is called print PDF. But just to show you the concept of how you define a new action, you just go over here and you define your actions. Your actions are sitting under a kind of a directory structure. So for example, if I go teams slash, we can do pay, I don't know, credit pay, for example. And this will create an action called credit pay. You would see it under here, and you would see there are two files. There's a JS file, which is the JavaScript, and a JSON file. This is the JSON file. It has the name of your action, and it has option to add parameters. So for example, you can say, hey, I need a new parameter here, which would be a credit card. And so this needs to be one word, and then the label would be, for example, credit number. And you can, of course, add more parameters. Over here, you can also specify the return from this method. And then you can actually have the code that is going to be executed, right? So over here, you would write a bunch of code to do something, right? So you can, it's basically any Java code that you want, right? Yeah. Something like that, okay? So that's how you define an action chain. And once you have an action chain defined, let's look at the print PDF one, which is a little bit more complete. Over here, you can see we are passing a bunch of parameters, the title of the movie we want to, or the title of the ticket, the subtitle, the file name that we generate, because this is printing PDF. And then in the actual action chain over here, we are embedding the JS PDF library. And then we're generating a PDF document with information about the ticket that we just bought. So this is how you define an action chain. And we would have a blog that shows you step by step how to do that. Just to show you how you're going to use it, in your little application, you have the print ticket, for example. Over here, you go to this button and you say, hey, I need a new action chain when I press this button. And now in this action chain, if you look under team, you can see the functionality that you defined as an action chain, and you can just drag and drop it here. Okay, so if we do print PDF, we need the title. This is a ticket. Here we need a subtitle. So this will, for example, can be the name of the movie, okay, or the movie ID, or something like that. So let's pick up the film. And then the file name. So the file name can, for example, again, be the film. Let's do plus .pdf, okay, like that. So I'm passing in a bunch of parameters to my functionality, to my action over here. And again, if I wanted, I can now do the credit payment over here, just drag and drop it, just like any other action. Okay. And then if you actually switch your page to be at runtime, I'm not sure actually if it works in the preview. I might actually need to do this directly from my component over here, which is inside the book ticket. So if we actually run my little application now, see if it works. I got my set of movies over here, and I can click on a movie and go get ticket. Okay, and then when I click print ticket, it downloads this little PDF over here, and the PDF would have the information about the movie I'm seeing, the title I provided. Basically, my action chain kind of works directly over here, just like any other action chain. So those were some of the new features in terms of development. Again, action chain fragments that are part of here, and of course, the page flow diagram that is now also a way for you to develop your application. Let's go back to the slides, talk about some of the other features. Let's talk about the backend of your application. On the REST services, we are now supporting directly in the UI designer, working with form data type of inputs and binary payloads, both inputs and outputs from REST services. So it makes it a lot easier to define those type of REST services and also to test them directly in your user interface. Another thing that we did is we took the transform function, which is something you need to define for REST services that are not based on what we call the open API spec that Oracle uses. So if you need to have a REST service that does things like sorting, query by example, and pagination, you need to define a transform function. We have samples for that, for example, for ORDs, if you want to do those. Up until now, you would define them kind of at the server endpoint level. Now you can actually define them also at the backend level. So you can define a backend and have a transform defined there. You can define them at the service level, and you can define them at the endpoint level. And each level inherits from the previous one. So if you define them at the backend, each service that is defined from this backend would automatically inherit those unless you overwrite it. And similarly, if you have it over there, the endpoints would also inherit those. So there's a new interface to define those. Functionality-wise, it's the same thing. It's just a bunch of JavaScript that takes our communication and clarifies it in terms of how we send it over to that REST service. So this is very useful when you're working, for example, with SDPs in your application. The other type of backends that you use in Visual Builder are business objects. Hopefully you all know that in the last release, we added the ability to create business objects on top of existing schema in your database. So if you have a database, an Oracle database in the cloud with a bunch of tables with data in them, you can now very easily in Visual Builder point to those tables and create business objects based on those tables. Okay. Basically creating a REST layer on top of those tables that you can use in your application, and then add your all your business logic and security at the business object level. Now, up until now, this would all work on the same schema for all the stages of your application. In the new release, we allow you to add the ability to specify different schemas for different life stages of your application. So a different schema for, let's say, development versus testing versus production. Okay. Again, something that is very useful for a lot of our customers. You do all of this directly from your application profile. So just like you can define different backends and different services that you use in production versus development, you can do the same for your schemas. Okay. So this is defined over there. One more thing to mention. In Business Object, we did a few other enhancements. We have now validations on the column metadata to make sure that it's a valid metadata. When you're tracing the execution of queries against a business object, we now show you total possible items. So this is very helpful, again, to tune your application. If you know that a query is going to get a lot of records, you can basically kind of limit the execution of that and control it better when you're designing the application. The other thing that we do is for business objects that are directly created from Visual Builder and create their own tables, we now show you which schema they are based in, both in VB and in VB Studio. Okay, and so let me show you those couple of features again in our instance over here. I'll switch to another application. Let's go to the shop application. So this application has a bunch of business objects that are based on tables in a schema in a database. Okay, so if you look at our application setting over here under business object, you can see which schema I'm using to base my application on. And one of the things you can now do under application profile, there's a section here for business objects. Okay, and you can now, for example, duplicate this, create our production instance. Okay, so this would be our production profile. This is what we would use for our publish of the application. Okay, and then I can say, hey, in production, I'm actually not using the shop. I'm using the shop prod schema in the database that I'm connected to. So this allows you to have the actual production data separate, of course, from the development data in your table in two different schemas with different set of tables. And of course, when we now publish our application from here, or when we're running a build job from Visual Builder Studio and setting the profile, I can specify prod and we would know which database to point to or which schema to point to. That was one thing I wanted to show you. The other thing was in services. If you create a service connection now, I don't know if I have one. Let me just quickly pick up a URL to a service. We'll do over here. I don't know if I actually have a service that requires form input or binary input, but just to show you the concept, if I go back to my application and I define a little service, actually, let's make this post service. So we're actually bringing in things over. Okay. When you look at the request now and the body over here, up until now, you were just putting in the JSON information. Now you can also do a form data. So you can define things like there's a name, okay, and there's, I don't know, ID, stuff like that. So this allows you to define form-based input to your application. Also allows you to work with multi-part form data over here. And the other option is binary. So if the input to a REST service is some binary file, you can actually create a binary definition over here for that one. That also works again for the test aspects. So you can do the tests over here. And in the response, we would know how to handle those type of things as well in terms of octet stream, for example, for binary data and form data. So this would make working with with a bigger variety of REST services easier in Visual Builder. All right. Just a reminder here, there's also a section of Visual Builder called the Visual Builder add-in for Excel. This is basically allowing you to use Excel spreadsheet as a front end to a bunch of REST services, whether it's business object or Oracle SaaS services or even ORDS. This is kind of released separately from Visual Builder. It's its own download that you can get, and it works with your Visual Builder backend. We are now at version 3.1. They are releasing their own versions in a different frequency, but you can keep up with them. They have a Twitter account that you can track. Also, just look at the download page and you can see the latest and of course our documentation page. There's a bunch of new features in the Excel plugin, including the ability to clear the browser cache, to define in a better way how you deal with ancestor fields, different way that they show warnings when you load data and things fail, like for example, the reject over here, or when you download data in both directions, we can show you this, and a bunch of other enhancement over there. So again, If you're using this or if you're considering using it, make sure that you're on the latest version, you get new functionality and new capabilities. And that's about it for this release of Visual Builder. So again, this is starting to roll out this week. It's gonna hit your instances during this month. If you want to learn more about those features, our docs are going to get updated when the new release hits the street. So again, if you're looking at the integration instance, you're going to look at the integration documentation and you will see it over there. In Visual Builder, you'll see it in the Visual Builder, and in the Visual Builder Studio, you'll see it in the book for Visual Builder Studio. All those new features are listed under the new features chapter in our documentation with links to detailed documentation about each one of those new features. We're going to have a blog entry on our blogs on the blog.oracle.com/vbcs with the new feature published probably later this week. And of course, as the time passes, we're going to put in new blog entries about other new features with more in-depth showing you how to use those features and leverage them. Again, every time that we put something out, we try to post it on the LinkedIn. I also post it usually on my Twitter account. If you're following Shai Oracle, I'm posting there every time that we have an update. So it's always good to be on top of things. Even if you're not using a new feature or a new capability, it's important to learn about it because at some point in the future, you might need it. And it's good to know that, hey, it's available for you and I can use it. So that's all we had time for today. Let's see if we have any open questions on the Q&A panel, anything that wasn't answered. Not right now.
That was pretty quiet.
Yeah, pretty quiet. Okay, so hopefully that was pretty clear for everyone. Again, if you have any questions, technical questions beyond that, we have a forum on our community on community.oracle.com. Under customers, there's an application development area and there's a Visual Builder forum. It's also available directly from your Visual Builder under the top menu on the right side. There's a link to our forum and you can feel free to ask questions there. Again, in terms of accessing Visual Builder instances, it should be under your, if you're now on a commercial data center, it would be not under OCI Classic Services, but you can now find it directly under application development. You would see Visual Builder entry over there. And that's just trying to answer some of the questions I'm seeing on the chat. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you next month when we cover some of the other new functionality. Have a great day.